The day they threw me out. Rain lashed the windows of the house I'd called home for a decade, as if the sky itself wept for my loss. My husband, Ethan, had been gone 3 weeks, his heart giving out in the quiet of a Tuesday night, and I was still drowning in grief when his mother, Margaret, stood in the doorway, her face cold as stone, and said, "This house belongs to the family. You're not family anymore." What does it mean to lose everything in a single moment? I stood there, clutching Ethan's old sweater, its scent of cedar and him fading, as his brother, Daniel, shoved a cardboard box into my arms. "Pack what's yours and go," he said, his voice clipped. No trace of the warmth we'd shared over Sunday dinners. The house, a sprawling Victorian we'd restored together, wasn't just walls and floors. It was where Ethan proposed, where we dreamed of raising children, where I thought I'd grow old. Now, it was a battlefield, and I was the enemy. I could have screamed, begged, or fought, but my body felt hollow, like grief had carved out my fight. How do you argue with people who've decided you're nothing? Margaret, Daniel, and their father, George, stood united, their eyes devoid of compassion. They'd never liked me, Ethan's outsider wife, the city girl who didn't fit their small-town dynasty. Ethan's love had shielded me from their disdain. But without him, I was exposed, raw, and alone. I packed in silence, rain soaking my clothes as I dragged 2 boxes to my car. The neighbors watched from their porches, their pity sharper than knives. What would you do if the life you built was stripped away? I drove to a motel on the edge of town, the neon sign flickering like my hope. That night, alone in a sagging bed, I stared at the ceiling, Ethan's sweater pressed to my chest. But something flickered inside me, a spark of defiance. They thought they'd broken me. They were wrong. The next morning, I sat in a diner, nursing black coffee, when I overheard a name, Clara Hensley. She was a lawyer, known for taking on impossible cases. What does it take to fight when you've lost everything? I found her office, a cramped room above a bookstore, and poured out my story. Clara, sharp-eyed and barely 30, leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen. "They didn't just kick you out," she said. "They broke the law. Ethan's will, did you ever see it?" I hadn't. Ethan and I had talked about wills. But at 35, we thought we had time. Clara's question planted a seed. What if Ethan had left me something they were hiding? She agreed to take my case. No charge. Her smirk promising a fight. "The Warrens think they own this town," she said. "Let's show them they don't own you." Clara dug into the Warrens' history, and I scoured my memories for clues. Ethan had mentioned a safe in his study, hidden behind a painting. Why had I never asked what was inside? Days later, Clara called me to her office, her voice electric. "There's a will," she said, "and it's not what they're claiming." She'd found a draft in Ethan's lawyer's files, naming me as the primary beneficiary of the house and his estate. The Warrens had suppressed it, forging a new document to cut me out. Anger surged, hot and alive, replacing the numbness. How do you confront betrayal from those you called family? I thought of Ethan's smile, his promise to always protect me. I wouldn't let them erase Heimer me. Clara and I built a case, piece by piece, uncovering the Warrens' lies. They'd manipulated Ethan's lawyer, bribed a notary, and assumed I'd slink away. But I was done running. By the end of the first month, we filed a lawsuit. The Warrens laughed it off, their lawyer smug in his tailored suit. "You're wasting your time, Ms. Harper," he said at the preliminary hearing. "The house is ours." But Clara's eyes gleamed with something dangerous hope. "What does it feel like to stand up when everyone expects you to fall?" I was about to find out. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and old coffee, a sterile stage for the war we were waging. I sat beside Clara, my hands clasped tight to hide their trembling. As the Warrens entered, their faces a mask of confidence. Why do some people believe they're untouchable? Margaret's lips curled in a faint sneer. Daniel avoided my gaze, and George sat rigid, his patriarch's pride unshaken. They thought this was a formality, a nuisance to swat away. Clara leaned close, her voice a whisper. They're nervous. Look at Daniel's hands. I glanced, his fingers twitched, betraying the calm he projected. What secrets do we hide in our smallest gestures? Clara had uncovered more than the will. The Warrens' business, Warren Timber, was teetering on fraud, shady deals Ethan had opposed before his death. He'd been gathering evidence, storing it in that safe I'd never opened. The first hearing was a skirmish. Their lawyer, Mr. Vance, argued the forged will was legitimate, claiming Ethan had changed his mind about me. Ms. Harper was estranged. He lied smoothly. Ethan wanted his family to inherit. My stomach churned. Estranged. We'd been planning a trip to Italy when he died. Clara countered with the draft will, authenticated by Ethan's old lawyer, now retired and furious at the Warrens' deception. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, raised an eyebrow. This needs investigation, she said, setting a trial date. After, I drove to our house under the pretense of retrieving a forgotten coat. What drives you to reclaim what's yours? The Warrens hadn't changed the locks yet. Arrogance or oversight. And I slipped inside. The study smelled of Ethan's books, his presence lingering in the air. Behind the painting, I found the safe. Its combination, our anniversary date. Inside was a USB drive, labeled for Anna. My hands shook as I pocketed it, heart pounding like I was a thief in my own home. Back at the motel, I plugged the drive into Clara's laptop. It held emails, contracts, and recordings. Ethan's voice, steady and resolute, detailing the Warrens' illegal logging deals. They're destroying the land, he said in one file, and I won't let them. Why had he kept this from me? To protect me, I realized, tears blurring my vision. His fight was now mine. Clara's excitement was palpable. This is dynamite, she said. We can't just win the house, we can take them down. But doubt not at me. What does it cost to fight for justice when it means destroying people you once loved? Margaret had baked me birthday cakes. Daniel had been Ethan's best man. Yet they'd cast me out without a thought. I nodded to Clara. Do it. We spent weeks preparing, interviewing former Warren Timber employees who'd been silenced or fired. One, a grizzled foreman named Tom, met us in a diner, his hands scarred from years in the mills. Ethan was the only honest Warren, he said. They threatened me when I spoke up. His testimony, paired with Ethan's evidence, built a case not just for the house, but for fraud and embezzlement. The night before the trial, I sat in my motel room, staring at Ethan's sweater. What would he think of me now, fighting his family? I imagined his hand on mine, his voice saying, "You're stronger than you know." I wasn't just fighting for the house, Anna Maria, it was for him. For us. For the truth. The Warrens had underestimated me, but their biggest mistake was thinking I'd stay broken. The trial began with a hush, the courtroom packed with townsfolk whispering about the Warrens' downfall. I wore Ethan's favorite blue dress, a silent tribute, as I took the stand. What does it feel like to face those who betrayed you? Margaret's eyes bored into me, her disapproval a familiar weight. But I held my head high. Clara had coached me. Tell the truth. Anna, let them see your heart. I recounted our life, Ethan's love, our dreams, the night he died in my arms. I spoke of the eviction, my voice breaking as I described Margaret's cold words. The jury leaned forward, some dabbing their eyes. Why does vulnerability feel like both weakness and power? Clara presented the draft will, Ethan's handwriting clear in the margins, naming me his heir. Vance objected, calling it circumstantial, but the judge allowed it. Then came the USB drive. Clara played Ethan's recordings, his voice filling the room like a ghost. My family's cutting corners, he said, detailing illegal land deals. The jury gasped. Daniel shifted, his face gray. What happens when the truth exposes those you trusted? Clara called Tom, the foreman, who testified about threats and falsified records. The Warrens' empire, built on Ethan's integrity, was crumbling. Outside court, Daniel cornered me, his voice low. "You're destroying us." "Anna." "For what?" I wanted to scream for everything you took, but I saw fear in his eyes, not malice. Was he a villain or a pawn in his parents' game? "You did this," I said, walking away. That night, Clara found me staring at old photos of Ethan. "You okay?" she asked. I wasn't, but I nodded. This is for him. The trial stretched on, each day peeling back the Warrens' lies. A former accountant testified about hidden accounts, money siphoned from Ethan's trust. Clara was relentless, her questions sharp as blades. But doubt crept in. What if winning meant losing the last pieces of Ethan's family? I pushed it aside. They'd made their choice when they threw me out. By the third week, the town was buzzing. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, calling it the Warren Reckoning. I felt exposed, my grief on display. But Clara reminded me, this isn't just about you. It's about justice. What does justice mean when it's personal? I clung to Ethan's memory, his belief in doing right, and found strength in his legacy. As the trial neared its end, Clara uncovered a final piece, a letter from Ethan to me, hidden in the safe with the USB. "Anna, if anything happens, fight for what's ours." It read, "I love you always." Tears fell as I read it aloud in court, my voice steady despite the ache. The jury saw Minute a gold digger, but a widow honoring her husband. The Warrens' fate was sealed. The courtroom felt smaller as the trial reached its climax, the air thick with anticipation. Clara stood before the jury, her closing argument a masterpiece of logic and emotion. The Warrens stole Anna's home, her security, and her husband's legacy, she said, her voice rising. But they underestimated her strength. What does it mean to be underestimated? I felt every eye on me, some with pity, others with respect. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. The Warrens' defense faltered. Vance tried to paint me as greedy, but Ethan's letter and recordings were undeniable. The jury deliberated for 2 days, an eternity in my motel room, where I paced, clutching Ethan's sweater. What do you hold on to when everything else is gone? Clara called me to the courthouse on the third morning, her voice calm but urgent. "It's time." The verdict was swift. The judge ruled the house and Ethan's estate mine, citing the forged will as fraud. Warren Timber faced criminal charges for environmental violations and embezzlement, with fines that would cripple their business. Margaret's face crumpled. George stared ahead, unblinking. Daniel approached me after, his voice hoarse. "I didn't know about the forgery," he said. Could I believe him? I wanted to, but trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. Moving back into the house felt surreal. The rooms echoed with Ethan's absence, but they were mine again. I walked through each one, touching the walls we'd painted, the shelves we'd built. What does it mean to reclaim a home? It wasn't just about ownership, it was about honoring our life together. I found a photo of us in the study, laughing in the garden, and pinned it to the fridge, a small act of defiance. Clara helped me navigate the aftermath. The Warrens' business collapsed under lawsuits, and the town turned on them, their influence evaporating. I didn't glow tide lost too much for that. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. What do you do when you've won but still feel broken? I started a community garden in Ethan's name, using part of the estate to fund it. Locals joined, their hands in the soil, healing alongside me. But the Warrens weren't done. A week after the verdict, I found a letter slipped under my door, and signed but in Margaret's elegant script. "You'll regret this," it read. Fear prickled my skin. What lengths would they go to for revenge? Clara urged me to install security cameras, and I did, but the threat lingered like a shadow. I wasn't the same woman they'd evicted. Grief had forged me into something stronger. But I wasn't invincible. As I stood in the garden, planting the first seeds, Tom, the foreman, stopped by. Ethan would be proud, he said, his gruff voice soft. I smiled, dirt under my nails, and realized I was living for both of us now. The Warrens' mistake wasn't just kicking me out, it was thinking I wouldn't fight back. The garden bloomed, a riot of color against the house's gray exterior. But peace was fleeting. Late one night, my phone buzzed with an anonymous text, "Leave, or you'll lose more than a house." My heart raced. Who holds power in fear? I called Clara, who arrived with coffee and a plan. They're desperate, she said. Desperate people make mistakes. We reported the threat to the police, who traced it to a burner phone, unprovable. But we knew it was the Warrens. I refused to cower. What does it take to stand firm when fear claws at you? I hired a private investigator, a quiet man named Leo, who dug into the Warrens' movements. He found Daniel meeting with shady figures at a bar outside town, discussing deals to save their business. Clara's eyes lit up. They're not just threatening you, they're breaking more laws. We gathered evidence, Leo tailing Daniel while I kept the garden growing, a symbol of my resolve. The townsfolk rallied around me, bringing seedlings and stories of the Warrens' bullying. Mrs. Carter, the librarian, told me how Margaret had pressured her to fire a whistleblower years ago. Why do some use power to silence? I listened, my anger tempered by purpose. This wasn't just my fight, Anna Maria, it was for everyone they'd hurt. Clara filed a restraining order against the Warrens, citing the threat. In court, Margaret denied it, her voice trembling with indignation. But the judge wasn't swayed. The order was granted, and their reputation sank further. Daniel, however, reached out, asking to meet at the diner. Against Clara's advice, I went. What do you owe someone who betrayed you? He looked haggard, his bravado gone. I didn't sign up for this, he said. Mom and Dad, they pushed me. I wanted to believe him, but his hands shook, just like in court. He offered a deal, dropped the charges, and he'd testify against his parents. Clara warned it could be a trap, but I saw a crack in the Warrens' armor. What risks are worth taking for the truth? I agreed, on the condition he provide proof. Days later, he sent a flash drive more recordings, this time of Margaret and George planning to intimidate me. We'll scare her out, Margaret's voice hissed. My blood ran cold, but Clara grinned. This is checkmate. We turned the drive over to the police, who opened a new investigation. The Warrens' empire unraveled faster now, their assets frozen. I walked through the garden, the sun warm on my face, and felt Ethan's presence. Was this what he wanted? Justice, not revenge? I wasn't sure, but I kept moving forward. Planting, building, living. The town began to heal with me. The garden became a gathering place. Kids running through rows of sunflowers. Neighbors sharing stories. I wasn't alone anymore. But as I locked the house one night, a shadow moved in the yard. My breath caught. The Warrens' biggest mistake was thinking I'd break, but had I underestimated them? The shadow in the yard was gone by the time I grabbed a flashlight. But my pulse didn't slow. Was fear a sign of weakness or survival? I checked the security footage, nothing clear. Just a blur near the garden. Clara insisted I stay with her for a few nights. But I refused. This was my home, my stand. I installed motion lights and slept with a bat by the bed. Ethan's sweater still my anchor. The police investigation gained traction. Daniel's recordings led to a raid on Warren Timber's offices, uncovering falsified environmental reports. Margaret and George were called in for questioning. Their faces splashed across local news. What does it feel like to watch power crumble? I felt no joy, only a hollow satisfaction. They'd built their legacy on lies, and now it was collapsing. Daniel kept his distance, but his testimony was damning. He detailed years of coercion, How his parents had controlled every decision, from the business to the forged will. I loved Ethan, he told the prosecutor, his voice breaking. I should have stood up sooner. Could I forgive him? Not yet, but his words softened the edges of my anger. Clara, ever pragmatic, focused on the end game. We're not just winning the house, she said. We're rewriting their story. The garden became my refuge, each seedling a promise to Ethan. Townsfolk brought food, tools, even a bench carved with his name. One evening, Mrs. Carter handed me a journal Ethan's, found in the library's donation bin. Why had it been discarded? Its pages held his thoughts on the Warrens' greed, his plans to expose them, and his love for me. Anna's my home, he wrote. Tears fell, but they were cleansing, not crushing. Then came the fire. It started small, a flicker in the garden's corner, but it spread fast, devouring sunflowers. I ran outside, hose in hand, neighbors joining me to douse the flames. The fire department ruled it arson. What drives someone to destroy beauty? Security footage showed a hooded figure, but no face. Clara's jaw tightened. They're desperate now? We doubled security, and I slept less, haunted by the smell of smoke. The final court date loomed. Clara prepared me for the stand again, this time to testify about the threats and arson. Show them your strength, she said. I thought of Ethan's journal, his belief in me. What legacy do we leave when we fight? I wasn't just fighting for the house or justice, I was fighting for the life we dreamed of, the one the Warrens tried to erase. As I walked into court, the garden's ashes still clung to my shoes. The Warrens sat defeated, their empire in ruins. I took a breath, ready to speak, ready to end this. Their biggest mistake wasn't just evicting me, it was thinking I'd let them win. The courtroom was silent as I took the stand, my voice steady despite the weight of every eye. I spoke of the fire, the threats, the garden that carried Ethan's memory. They took my home once, I said, looking at Margaret, George, and Daniel. They tried to take it again with fear. But I'm still here. What does it mean to stand unbroken? The jury's faces softened, some nodding, others wiping tears. Clara's smile was small but fierce. The prosecution played the new recordings. Margaret's voice cold and calculating, planning to scare Anna out. Gasps rippled through the room. Vance's objections were weak, his confidence shattered. The judge's gavel fell like a thunderclap, guilty on fraud, forgery, and now conspiracy to intimidate. Margaret and George faced jail time. Daniel, cooperating, got probation. What is justice if it doesn't heal the heart? I felt no triumph, only closure. The house was mine, legally and forever, but it was the garden I returned to. We replanted, the community stronger than before, turning ashes into new growth. Tom carved a sign, Ethan's garden. Kids laughed among the flowers, and I felt Ethan's presence, not as a ghost, but as a warmth in the soil. How do you rebuild when the past is gone? You start small, with a seed, a story, a home. Daniel came to the garden one evening. His shoulders slumped. I'm sorry, Anna, he said. I was weak. I looked at him, the brother Ethan loved, and saw a man broken by his own choices. Could I forgive? Work on yourself, I told him. That's what Ethan would want. He nodded, tears in his eyes, and left. Forgiveness wasn't mine to give yet, but maybe someday. Clara and I celebrated quietly, sharing wine in the kitchen where Ethan and I once danced. She was moving to a bigger firm, her reputation soaring. You changed this town, she said. I shook my head. We did. The Warrens' legacy was gone, their name synonymous with greed. Mine was tied to the garden, to resilience, to love that outlasted loss. Years later, the house stood proud, filled with new memories, community dinners, laughter, life. I kept Ethan's journal on the nightstand, his words a reminder, Anna's my home. The Warrens' biggest mistake was thinking they could break me. They didn't know I'd rise. Not just for me, but for him, for us, for everyone they tried to silence. As I planted a new sunflower, I smiled. This was my victory, not their destruction, but my survival.